The Blue Swallow Motel, Tucumcari, New Mexico. There's a motel in Tucumcari, New Mexico, where the neon sign has been glowing since before most of us were born. A blue swallow bird, wings spread, diving through the desert night in brilliant blue and pink. The Blue Swallow Motel was built in 1939 on the old Route 66, and it has been welcoming travelers ever since. 12 rooms, attached garages, pink stucco walls with shell designs, the kind of place that looks exactly like a postcard from 1955. But the Blue Swallow carries something with it, something that doesn't show up in the photographs. The story most people tell centers on Lillian Redman. Lillian came to New Mexico in 1915, traveling west in a covered wagon as a girl. She worked as a Harvey girl, one of the young women hired by Fred Harvey to serve food and hospitality to travelers across the Southwest. In 1958, her husband Floyd bought the Blue Swallow as an engagement present. They installed the famous neon sign and ran the motel together until Floyd died in 1973. After that, Lillian ran it alone for 25 more years. Through the decline of Route 66, through the years when the interstate pulled the traffic away, and one by one the motels around her went dark, Lillian kept the Blue Swallow open. She would give rooms away to people who couldn't pay. She would sit in the courtyard at night and talk to anyone who stopped. She wrote a benediction, a traveler's blessing, and slipped it under the door of every guest. It read, "May these days be pleasant for you, profitable for society, helpful for those you meet, and a joy to those you know and love best." Lillian sold the motel in 1998 and passed away in 1999, and that, by most accounts, is where the story should end. Except the guests keep reporting things. A presence in the courtyard late at night, the feeling of someone standing near the office door, watching, not threatening, not cold, just there, as though someone who spent 40 years caring for travelers couldn't quite bring herself to stop. Former owners have spoken carefully about it, lights that turn on by themselves, the smell of coffee brewing in the office at 3 in the morning when nobody is awake, a rocking chair on the porch that moves on, still nights, small things, the kind you might explain away if they happen once. But they keep happening. Some guests have reported waking in the middle of the night to a feeling of deep calm, as though someone had just been sitting on the edge of the bed, keeping watch. Others have heard footsteps in the gravel outside their room, soft and deliberate, but when they look through the curtains, the courtyard is empty. The neon sign throws its blue and pink light across the pavement, and there is no one there. One former owner described finding a handwritten note slipped under the office door one morning. It was in a handwriting no one recognized. It said simply, "Thank you for keeping the light on." Nobody at the Blue Swallow calls it a haunting. That's not the right word. Lillian Redman loved this place more than most people love anything. She said it herself. "I end up traveling the highway in my heart, with whoever stops here, for the night." Maybe that's all this is. A woman who loved the road so much that some part of her never checked out. If you stay at the Blue Swallow, park your car in the garage beside your room, turn off the lights, listen to the desert, and if the courtyard feels a little less empty than it should, if the neon seems to glow a little warmer than electricity alone can account for, just know that Lillian is probably glad you stopped. She always was. Bloody Bucket Road, Holbrook, Arizona. Between Holbrook and Show Low in northeastern Arizona, there is a stretch of road that the locals have called Bloody Bucket Road for as long as anyone can remember. The official name is Hunt Road, but nobody uses that. The most common version of the story goes like this. Sometime in the late 1800s, a roadhouse sat along this stretch, a rough place that served miners, cattlemen, and anyone else passing through the territory. Fights broke out regularly, and blood was a common sight on the floor. The owner would mop up the blood with a bucket, and the bucket was said to never go dry. Night after night, the bucket filled. The place earned its name. Another version is grimmer. A family was murdered along the road, and their blood was found collected in a bucket near the scene. No one was ever caught. No motive was ever established. The bucket sat in the dust by the side of the road, and the story spread through the territory like wildfire. Which version is true? Possibly neither, possibly both. What is true is that travelers along this stretch have been reporting strange things for well over a century. Drivers have described headlights that flicker and die for no reason as they pass through, engines that stall and won't restart for several minutes, then turn over perfectly once you've pushed the car 100 yards down the road. The feeling of being watched from the scrubland, that prickling sensation on the back of your neck that your body recognizes before your mind does. Some have reported seeing figures standing by the side of the road at night, not hitchhikers, figures that don't move, don't wave, don't react to headlights. They simply stand there, and by the time you check your mirror, they're gone. The area around Holbrook has a violent history that goes back long before Route 66. This was Apache territory, and the conflicts between settlers and Native Americans were brutal on both sides. Holbrook itself was so rough in the 1880s that legend says the town's first sheriff was killed on his very first day. The Pleasant Valley War, one of the bloodiest feuds in American frontier history, played out in the hills nearby. That kind of history leaves marks on a landscape, whether you believe those marks are literal, that the land itself absorbs and remembers trauma, or metaphorical, that the stories we tell shape how we experience a place. Something about Bloody Bucket Road feels different. The air is heavier, the silence is louder. The desert, which elsewhere in Arizona feels open and inviting, feels closed here, watchful. If you're passing through Holbrook and someone mentions Bloody Bucket Road, you might be tempted to take the detour. Just keep your tank full. You don't want to stall out here. The Devil's Elbow, Pulaski County, Missouri. In the Ozark Hills of central Missouri, Route 66 passes through a stretch of country so steep and winding that it earned a name people haven't forgotten: Devil's Elbow. The name comes from a sharp bend in the Big Piney River below, where floating logs used to jam during the lumber era. The loggers cursed the bend, and the name attached itself to the road, the bridge, and the tiny hamlet that grew up alongside. The old road through Devil's Elbow is one of the most scenic stretches of Route 66 in the entire country. The highway cuts through deep rocky walls, a section called Hooker Cut, and crosses the river on a steel truss bridge from 1923 that's now open only to pedestrians. The views from the bridge are beautiful, but the beauty has always had a shadow. In the 1920s and 1930s, before the road was widened and the worst curves were straightened, Devil's Elbow was one of the most dangerous stretches on Route 66. The original road clung to the hillside above the river with no guardrails, tight curves, and steep drop-offs. Cars went over the edge regularly. In rain or fog, the road became a trap. Locals say more people died on this stretch than anywhere else on Route 66 in Missouri. The Elbow Inn, a bar and restaurant that sat along the old road for decades, became famous for ghost stories. Patrons would talk about headlights that appeared behind you and vanished. the sound of a car horn echoing off the rock walls when no car was there, and a woman in white standing at the bridge who disappeared when approached. The woman in white is the most persistent story. She appears on foggy nights, standing on or near the old bridge, looking down at the river. Different people have described her differently, but the details that stay consistent are: she wears a pale dress, she stands very still, and she is gone the moment you look away and look back. The most common explanation is that she's connected to one of the accidents. A young woman whose car went over the edge on a rainy night in the 1930s. Her body was recovered from the river, but the car was never pulled out. Some versions say her fiancé was driving and survived. Others say she was alone. The details shift with every telling, which is how you know a story has been in circulation for a long time. The bones stay the same. The flesh changes. At night, the fog rolls up from the river and settles on the bridge. The rock walls amplify small sounds. And if you walk out onto the bridge in that fog and look down at the dark water, you might understand why people see things here. The landscape is doing half the work. Your mind does the rest. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe the woman in white is standing right there, just beyond where the fog thins, watching the river the way she has for 90 years. The spook light, Joplin, Missouri /Quapaw, Oklahoma. On the border between southwestern Missouri and northeastern Oklahoma, a few miles from Route 66, there is a dirt road that runs east to west through an area the locals call the Devil's Promenade. And on this road, for more than a century, people have seen a light. They call it the spook light, a ball of orange fire somewhere between the size of a baseball and a basketball that appears in the darkness and moves down the center of the road. It bobs, it shifts, it zigzags. Sometimes it hovers above the treetops. Sometimes it drops to the road surface and rolls toward you. Then it retreats, shrinks, and vanishes. The first written reports date to 1881, but the oldest stories go back further. Cherokee people say the light was seen during the Trail of Tears in the 1830s, moving through the trees as thousands of displaced Native Americans were forced through this territory. The legends are many. One says it's the ghost of an Osage chief, murdered in the woods, wandering with a lantern he can never put down. Another tells of a miner who came home to find his cabin burned and his family taken. He set out with a lantern to search for them and never returned. The most romantic version involves two young Quapaw lovers who leaped to their deaths in the spring river rather than be separated. The light is the two of them, still searching for each other in the dark. Science has a different explanation. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers investigated in 1942 and concluded the light was caused by the refraction of car headlights on Route 66, which ran in alignment with Spook Light Road. In 1965, popular mechanics reached the same conclusion. Case closed? Not exactly. The reports predate cars. The light was seen in the 1880s, decades before automobiles arrived. And people who have seen it up close describe something that doesn't behave like reflected headlights. It changes color, it changes size, it moves against the wind. One witness described it passing between himself and a friend, standing 2 feet apart. A man named Arthur Spooky Meadows built a museum near the viewing spot in the 1950s. His son-in-law, Garland Spooky Middleton, inherited the museum and the nickname. The museum eventually burned down. The nicknames endured. Today the road is harder to visit. Authorities issue tickets for parking at night, but the light, according to those who still make the drive, continues to appear. It doesn't care about paving or tickets or scientific explanations. If you find yourself near Joplin after dark, sit in your car on a quiet road with the engine off. Watch the darkness ahead. Maybe you'll see headlights and nod along with the scientists. Or maybe you'll see something else, something that's been there since before the road, before the cars, before any of us. Something that isn't finished looking. The Wanderer of Route 66. Multiple states. Every long road has a phantom hitchhiker. Route 66 has several. But there's one figure that shows up more than any other, reported across multiple states and multiple decades. A man, always alone, always standing on the shoulder at night. He doesn't wave, he doesn't hold a sign. He just stands there, and when you pass him, something about the encounter stays with you in a way you can't explain. The descriptions are remarkably consistent. He's average height, wearing clothes that look slightly out of time, a coat that's a few decades too old, an old hat sometimes described as a fedora. His face is hard to make out, even in headlights. He's looking down the road, always west, as though waiting for something that hasn't arrived. The earliest reports come from Oklahoma in the 1940s. Truck drivers on the overnight runs between Oklahoma City and Amarillo would talk about a man standing on the shoulder near Clinton or Weatherford. They'd slow down, thinking he needed help, but by the time they pulled over, he was gone. Not walking away, just gone. By the 1950s, the stories had spread east and west. Drivers in Missouri reported him near Devil's Elbow. Drivers in Arizona saw him outside Seligman. In New Mexico, a woman driving alone near Santa Rosa described pulling over for a man standing so still she thought he was a road marker until she got close enough to see his face. She said he looked at her, and his expression was not frightening, but profoundly sad. The face of someone who had been waiting a very long time. She drove on. When she checked her mirror, the road behind her was empty. The phantom hitchhiker is one of the oldest ghost story archetypes in the world. Folklorists call it a vanishing hitchhiker legend, but the Route 66 version has a specific quality. The witnesses don't describe fear, they describe sorrow. The man on the road isn't threatening, he's lost. He seems to be looking for something, and every car that passes is not the one he's waiting for. Some people have woven backstories. A Dust Bowl migrant who died heading west but never arrived. A soldier who came home from war and found home wasn't there anymore. A man whose car broke down on a lonely stretch, who walked for help and never found it. None of these stories can be verified. That's the nature of this kind of legend. But the number of independent reports from different people in different states across different decades is striking. Something is happening on the shoulder of Route 66 at night. If you're driving at night and you see a figure on the shoulder, standing alone, looking west, you have two choices: slow down and look closer, or keep driving and check your mirror. Either way, he'll be gone when you look again. He always is. Skinwalker Country, New Mexico and Arizona. A note before we begin. This episode discusses legends from Navajo culture. These stories are sacred to the Dene people, and sharing them publicly is considered disrespectful by many within the community. What follows is a general overview drawn from publicly available sources. We present it with respect, and with the understanding that these beliefs are not folklore to be consumed as entertainment. They are part of a living spiritual tradition. Route 66 passes through hundreds of miles of land sacred to the Navajo Nation. In New Mexico, between Albuquerque and Gallup, and in Arizona from the state line through to Flagstaff, the highway crosses territory the Dene have inhabited for centuries. Within Navajo tradition, there exist entities known as skinwalkers. The Navajo word is Ye Nallushi, which translates roughly to "with it, he goes on all fours." A skinwalker is a medicine person who has turned to dark practices and can transform into an animal. The transformation is not a gift, it is a corruption. Many Navajo people will not discuss skinwalkers openly. To speak of them is to invite their attention. This isn't superstition, it is a deeply held spiritual boundary. Route 66 travelers driving through this territory at night have occasionally reported experiences that resist easy explanation. A common report involves a coyote or large dog that appears alongside the car and keeps pace at highway speed for distances no animal should sustain. Drivers describe the animal looking at them through the window, not at the car, at them, with an awareness that feels wrong. Other reports involve figures at the edge of the headlight beam, shapes that move too quickly, or not quickly enough, a person on all fours where no person should be, far from any road or settlement, moving in a way that doesn't look quite human. It is not our place to explain these experiences. That interpretation belongs to the Diné. What we can tell you is that the land between Gallup and Flagstaff carries a weight you can feel from the driver's seat, not hostile. The weight of a place that has been meaningful to people for a very long time and does not yield its meanings easily to outsiders. Drive this stretch at night and you will understand why stories grow here. The darkness is enormous. The stars are closer than you've ever seen them. Every shape at the edge of the road, every movement in the scrubland, every pair of eyes that catches your headlights and holds them for a beat too long will make you wonder. This is Skinwalker country. Be respectful. Be aware. And when you pass through, know that you are a guest. The Oatman Hotel, Oatman, Arizona. In the Black Mountains of western Arizona, there's a town called Oatman that looks like it was built by a movie set designer. Wooden sidewalks, false front buildings, wild burros wandering the main street. At the center sits the Oatman Hotel, a 2-story adobe building standing since 1902. The hotel's most famous story involves Clark Gable and Carole Lombard. According to legend, the two Hollywood stars spent their wedding night here on March 29, 1939, after eloping in Kingman. The room is still there, preserved on the 2nd floor. Historians dispute whether it actually happened, but the hotel maintains the story and displays the room. Whether it's true or not, it's a great story. But the ghost stories at the Oatman Hotel have nothing to do with movie stars. They're much older. The hotel was built during the mining boom, and the men who worked the gold mines were a rough, transient population. Bar fights were common. Shootings happened. The hotel served as boarding house, bar, and gathering place, and the walls absorbed more than their share of human drama. Staff and guests have reported 2 distinct presences. The first is on the ground floor in the old bar area. Heavy boots on the wooden floor when no one is walking. Glasses that move on the bar. A chill that comes and goes in specific spots. One bartender described feeling a hand on her shoulder when she was alone after closing. She turned around and there was nothing there. The second presence is on the 2nd floor. Visitors report a heavy, oppressive feeling in certain doorways, doors that swing open and closed on their own, and in the Gable and Lombard room, an occasional whiff of perfume, old-fashioned floral, something a woman might have worn in the 1930s. Some say the perfume belongs to a woman named Opal, a former resident whose story has been mostly lost to time. Others attribute it to Lombard herself. The hotel doesn't commit to either theory. Oatman After Dark is a different place. The tourists leave. The burros wander off. The gunfight actors hang up their holsters. And the hotel sits there in the dark, doing what it has done since 1902, waiting for the next guest. If you find yourself in Oatman as the sun drops behind the Black Mountains, pay attention to the hotel's second-floor windows. Every now and then, someone sees a figure standing in a window of a room that's supposed to be empty. They're gone by the time you look again. But for a moment, someone was up there, watching. Haunted chains, various locations along Route 66. Not every ghost on Route 66 has a name. Some of them live in the walls of old motels, in the kitchens of diners that have been serving the same counter for 70 years, and in the pump houses of gas stations that closed decades ago. This last episode is a tour of the haunted chains along the route, the Munger Moss Motel, Lebanon, Missouri. The Munger Moss has been welcoming Route 66 travelers since the 1940s, and its neon sign is one of the most photographed on the route. Ramona Lehman ran the motel for decades and was beloved by everyone who stayed there. After the motel closed to overnight guests following Ramona's passing, visitors and neighbors reported seeing lights on in rooms that should have been dark. A figure moving past windows. The office door opening and closing as though someone was greeting an arrival that no one else could see. Those who knew Ramona say it sounds exactly like her. The Elbow Inn, Devil's Elbow, Missouri. Before it closed for renovations, the Elbow Inn was famous for barbecue and strange occurrences, bottles falling off shelves with no vibration, the jukebox playing songs nobody selected, a cold spot near the back hallway that persisted through every season. The building sits near one of the most dangerous curves on Route 66, and the number of fatal accidents on that stretch is well documented. The Motels of Central Avenue, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Central Avenue in Albuquerque is lined with old motels, some beautifully restored, some slowly crumbling. Night clerks have reported hearing voices in empty rooms, finding beds disturbed in rooms that weren't rented, and seeing figures in the parking lot that vanish when approached. Thousands of travelers have passed through these rooms over 70 or 80 years, each carrying their own burdens. Maybe some of them didn't move on entirely. The old Riverton store, Riverton, Kansas. The Eisler Brothers store has been open since 1925. The pressed tin ceiling is original, and so some say are a few of the customers. Staff have reported hearing footsteps after closing, the sound of someone browsing the shelves when the building is locked. Small items move. The guest book has occasionally been found open to a specific page in the morning when it was closed the night before. The abandoned stations. Route 66 is lined with abandoned gas stations. Most are just empty buildings, but a few of them, particularly in western Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle, carry stories. Travelers who've pulled over to photograph them have reported sounds inside, a radio playing faintly, the ring of a cash register, a man's voice saying, "Fill her up," from a building that has been empty for 40 years. A business that defined someone's life doesn't always accept that it's over. The pumps are gone, but the attendant is still on shift. Route 66 is a road of memory. Every mile carries the weight of the people who drove it, worked alongside it, and built their lives around it. Some of that weight is joy, some of it is loss, and some of it, if you're listening carefully, refuses to stay in the past. That's the last of our ghost stories. If you're driving Route 66 at night and something catches your eye, a light in an empty window, a figure on the shoulder, the sound of a door opening in a building that should be locked, Just remember, you're on the most storied road in America, and not all the stories belong to the living. Safe travels, sleep well, and leave a light on.